Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. I'm your host, Brother Samuel. Today, craftsmen, on this bonus Monday, I'm traveling solo without Gabe or Ryan, but I have an awesome guest for you today. Brother Raymond E. Foster, a Masonic educator and author of the awesome new Masonic book, The Temple Within. Craftsmen, I picked up this book the other day and I am having an absolute blast with it. I'm excited to have the author on himself to talk about his book, as well as talk about many other topics, including how you and your lodge can get more active in the community. So stay tuned, craftsmen, for this awesome interview. And today I am very happy to have a new guest all the way from the great state of California, Brother Raymond, past master of San Dimas Lodge number 428. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's pretty awesome to have you on the show. You'll be the first guest from the great state of California that I've ever had.
I've been to Ohio a number of times. I used to go to faculty conclave in Cincinnati, and I always navigated around the giant domes, the Procter and Gamble domes. You'd know where you were in your city because you could look up in the skyline and tell where you were. And then a very good friend of mine, he moved back to the Cleveland area. And so I have a little bit of connection with the state of Ohio.
Hey, works for me. You probably visited those places more than I have. I'm up in Northwest Ohio, so up near Toledo, Michigan border. So we make our way down there every once in a while, but it's kind of a it's a little bit of a trek for us. But so, brother, you reached out, and I just want to ask, how long have you been a Mason?
It's going to be, I think I'm in my 19th year or 20th year, something like that.
Wow,
I could look it up, but it's around there, 19, I think.
I believe that. So 20 years have you been, almost 20 years, close enough. Have you been the past master of San Dimas Lodge number 428? Any other accolades, any other affiliations? Are you Scottish Rite? Are you York Rite? Anything like that?
Sure, I was actually raised in Mariposa number 24, which is outside of the Yosemite. I was up in Yosemite at the time. Uh, I met my first Mason. I knew he was a Mason. I was 15 years old. He was my future father-in-law. And he introduced me to Plato and Aristotle and Stoicism. And we had long conversations. And I thought at the time that Masons were men who sat around and thought of great ideals. And then I spent the next probably almost 30 years after that waiting to be asked to join. And I did not know that Masons would not ask you. And one day my father became ill. And so I traveled up north. I live in Southern California, and California is, it's 800 miles long. So I travel up north to care for my father. I move in with him. And his sister, my aunt, says, who is the worthy matron of the Eastern Star. Her husband is a Hiram Award winner of and a member of the Mariposa 24, and her boys, my cousins. So one day my aunt says, "Well, have you ever thought about being a Mason?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've been thinking my entire life about it." And she said, "Well, the boys can't ask you, but I can. Do you want to be a Mason?" And I said, "Well, heck yeah." And so the worthy matron of the Eastern Star went to the master of the lodge, and I was a Mason pretty quick and got raised in number 24. My father would pass away, and I moved back to home here where I raised my 5 children, and I have 9 grandchildren in the local area. And so I affiliated with San Dimas number 428. I still go to lodge almost every month in Mariposa. It's almost a 700-mile round trip drive. And so I was there Saturday because it's a lunar lodge. And so we meet on or before the full of the moon. And by the way, in case you want to know, there are 12 lunar lodges in Ohio. 10 or 12, I think it's 12. I know this because one of the research projects I'm involved in is researching lunar lodges. So
Hmm.
I will leave my house about 3:30 in the morning because they're a daylight lodge now, and I'll get up there, have breakfast, go to lodge. Sometimes I'll take lodge members and brothers from down here up there, and I'll go up a week from tomorrow. I'm going to go up to Merced, which is probably 300 miles away, to be part of a third degree. So I travel up and down the state. I I like driving, because it's the only place nobody can bother me. It's a lot of alone time, you know what I'm saying? So I enjoy that. So I came down to San Dimas and I didn't as you would say, traditionally go through the chairs. What I did was I showed up every Monday night for rehearsal, and I had memorized the ritual, and I kept saying, "Can I be this part?" And I would go into this part when somebody didn't show up, and then one day, the man who was gonna stand for junior warden backed out. I knew the work, and I had been in the lodge 6 or 7 years, and I was elected junior warden, and so I was a senior and, of course, master. Um, After I had affiliated with San Dimas, almost 12 years ago, my oldest grandsons, they're 27 and 28, so it's gonna be 15 years ago now. They joined the George Washington chapter of DeMolay, and I became the, chapter advisor, the chair of the DeMolay, about a year after that, and have been since. I still am. And, so that's where you talk about accolades. I did receive the Honorary Legion of Honor. I received the Hiram Award, California. That is the highest award a lodge can give you for work you do in the lodge. I'm the officers coach in San Dimas. I am not currently an officer in Mariposa, but last year I was the senior warden. Whenever they need an officer, I will step in. I won't do master in that community because I don't live there. I just think that's wrong. And I'm also was California Mason of the year of the pandemic, and that was for the Masonic education that I was doing in the various districts here in California. So that's me as a Mason. Um, I don't know you. That's me as a Mason. I was a state of meeting last night.
No, I there's a lot there's a lot to unpack even there. First off, I want to say how inspiring it is that you've gotten involved with DeMolay. Um, DeMolay is the only reason I became a Mason. I had no idea of masonry, and I found DeMolay when I was 12 years old, and the next step was obviously masonry once I turned 19 in Ohio, and it's it's great, and I just want to say thank you for giving back to the next generation because they are our future. And our listeners on this show, we can't say enough good things about the Order of DeMolay, but education is another big thing that we like to talk about in this on this show. It's kind of the backbone of masonry, in our opinion. Um, what is it about education that gets you so enthusiastic?
So we sat down and well, I was a policeman for 25 years and I retired 22 years ago. The day my first textbook came out, and I got a job to teach at university, and I taught at university for 10 years. So, I think teaching is probably in my blood. I was a training officer as a policeman and a sergeant, and lieutenant, and teaching is a big part of that. But we had a discussion and, going back a dozen years in San Dimas, we came up with 3 propositions. The first was that we wanted to change our lodge from a center of our community to a center of the community. And I will tell you today, I'm going to go to city council at 7 o'clock, and somebody will say, "Hey, how are things at the lodge?" They're not Masons. Or people say, "Can we rent the lodge?" The lodge is now a community asset. It's taken a dozen years, but it's now a community asset. The second thing we wanted to do is we wanted to turn the clock back and become Masons of 100 years ago, men of means and substance, men who were important within their communities. And so we decided to do that through the use of the tools of Freemasonry. And this is what this book is about that we're going to talk about. But we have 3 pillars: wisdom, strength, and beauty. And so if you look at those pillars, what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to contrive something. Well, the only way you get wisdom is through Masonic education. And every observant lodge must have Masonic education, not only at every stated meeting, but at every event. If we have a degree, a couple of minutes after the degree, after the candidate says, well, he had a great time and everybody congratulates him, myself or someone else will stand up and go, hey, here's something about the first degree or the second degree or the third degree. And we'll do a little Masonic education. Every event that we have, if it's a dinner or something, there is a small component of it that is Masonic education because the wisdom comes from our craft. And so if the men don't know what the symbols mean and what they could mean to them and how they can be used, what good is it? So that's the pillar of wisdom. The pillar of strength for us is to find the strength of a lodge is finding pathways for participation for the men based on their talents. We in masonry tend to emphasize the line going through the chairs. That's malarkey as far as I'm concerned. I think it probably discourages more men than it encourages. You don't have to go through the best mason I know, most valuable guy in our lodge has never been and will never be master of the lodge. Now, he has been our secretary for about 20 years now, so he's crucial to the operation of the place. But that's because he hasn't memorized this ritual and done all these things, doesn't mean that he's not a good mason. And so it's finding pathways for participation based on men's strengths that draws them into the group, and then makes eventually they may pop in to be an officer's line. And then lastly, the pillar of beauty. And I think that this is very biblical. We tend to, Mason is a secret society. Yeah, I suppose so. The only thing I think is secret is our modes of recognition, and that's about it. But everything else is out there. It's pretty much plain language. And we don't one of the chapters I wrote, one of the essays on secrecy. It is important to me, but it's important to understand why we have secrecy and why it's important, not just that we have secrets, because we really don't. Um, but beauty is, beauty to adorn. And so for us, beauty is how we display masonry outside of the lodge. Beauty is how the men work in the community on different projects. If you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, or you're a member of the Rotary, or you're a member of the Kiwanis Club, or whatever you're a member of, everyone also knows you're a Mason. And so all the good work that we do, all the education, the strengths, we display as the beauties of Freemasonry outside of the lodge. And so wisdom, strength, and beauty, wisdom, education, is, as your question is forefront to that.
That's perfect. Once again, a lot to unpack with that one. I I actually heavily agree with you that there's more there's more to masonry than just going through the chairs. In fact, it's probably, in my opinion, I mean, I'm the senior deacon, but it's only because the lodge needs someone to do it. I'm happy just being the guy that's here with everyone, doing the educational things and helping out with
So I've lost you. That
whatever
could
the
be
lodge
me,
needs.
or it could be
And I'll
you.
tell you what, in our lodge, the
Let me
guy
take a
that's
look here.
probably the most
I
useful
think it's
guy holding
probably
up
you.
this
Looks like I've
building
got good internet signal.
is
So,
not an officer.
oh, you're coming
So
back.
that's it's pretty cool you say that. I really like that. Um,
There we go.
but
Yes, I lost you for a
uh,
moment. I'm back.
can you see me okay?
Yeah.
So sorry about that. Like I said, sometimes there's some snafus, but uh, also I like how you broke that down and you put it into some core Masonic tenets. How how did you go about starting to get more active in the community to make masonry ingrained in society, into your community?
Well, a great many of us are in other organizations. I think the first thing is you got to understand that people, I suppose, that mentioned wrap their heads around that we are a fraternity with a charitable aspect. Okay. Now, the Rotary Club is a charity with a fraternal aspect. So many of us are in the Rotary Club. And in fact, we had formed a special satellite Rotary Club that does some of the things we do. We also invited other organizations to meet and use the lodge facility. We made sure they understood that the rental fee was down to the bare minimum. We have our women's club meets there. The Rotary Club does food drives and other things there, so the lodge becomes central to them. But I think you have to look out and seek those things within your community. And we tend, or at least in California, it seems lodges tend to rely on the Grand Lodge to determine what projects are going to be, or what is going to be a, uh, uh, a charitable thing we're going to do. Every stated meeting, we've done this since I've been there. Well, no, that's not true. I remember the master started it. every stated meeting, the master at the beginning of the year, the master picks a charity we're going to work on. And then every night at the end of stated meeting, at the end of every degree, puts his hat on the altar. And so if you got $20, you have $5, you get $2, you put it in there. And so the master has a charity he's ginning up money for all the time. And so there's a variety of ways we got involved in working in the community where we live, but other lodges do the same things.
Okay. I mean, it's definitely a good place to start. Here in Ohio, it's very similar. Sometimes it's very hard to get, I want to say, that inspiration. I think everybody's kind of waiting to see what the Grand Lodge wants everyone to do. And luckily, at my lodge here in Genoa, number 433, we took an active approach and we joined our local Chamber of Commerce. And now we're a diamond level sponsor for all the local events, and we're manning all of the hospitality booths and getting involved. It was definitely an easy first step, but it was one you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, we also joined the Chamber of Commerce
So,
as one of our first steps. That's a very practical thing. That's an extraordinarily practical thing to do. Go ahead.
and easy too. Surprisingly very easy. As far as other community involvements, what kind of things would you recommend to a lodge that they start? What's the best place for them to start at?
Well, I think that there's you should if you do you have a DMLA, do you have Rainbow Girls? Do you have some way to reach into the young people in the group, the young people in your community. What we do is we have a community outreach person every year, somebody that's their job, and they're the liaison with the uh, Chamber of Commerce. Now, this year, I happen to be the chair of the Chamber of Commerce here in town also. So at every stated meeting, there's a report on what's going on in the city and also what's going on in the chamber. And then our master quarterly goes to city council and he gives a report, say to the lodge, and he tells the city council what's going on in the lodge. And so we take advantage of all of the local ways to communicate, the various clubs, and just we don't hide our light. We just tell people here we are, here's what we do, and then we work with them. The other thing we do is we march in the local parade, the holiday parade. And the first year we did that, we didn't know what to expect, but people were shouting, "Oh, my dad was this, and my dad was that, my grandpa was this, and my grandpa was that." And so that's an annual thing now. I think we're in our 15th or 16th year, and we will march behind the master, and the master will be seated with his wife in a Model T with his top hat on, and the rest of us will be following with our aprons and jewels, and it's a hoot. Everybody knows who we are.
Sounds like a blast. It sounds like, and we've had a few other guests that have kind of had this sentiment as well, and perhaps you'll agree. It, that we have to get back out there in the community. Our faces have to be out there as Masons. The community needs to see us as Masons, and if we don't do that, we're kind of just a bunch of guys that are hiding up in a building somewhere. If the community doesn't see us, we're not doing good things or getting involved because of that, but it definitely does kind of help.
But some lodges are,
So,
some lodges are tree houses. I mean, and if that's what if
mhm,
that's if your lodge can survive, and you want it to be your tree house where your guys come and you come a couple of times a month and you get together and that's what your lodge is. I don't think that'll grow masonry, and I don't think that's what masonry is, but certainly your lodge could be that. We also have every Thursday night is open house. It's a social night. So somebody volunteers to we open up our game room at 6:30, and usually 6:30 to 8:30. And so men who are interested in Freemasonry come by. Guys will just come by and sit around and tell war stories and lies. And then we give tours frequently. When the Historical Society had a dinner in the lodge, afterwards I announced, would anybody like a tour of the lodge room itself upstairs? And we have a layman's tour that we give. So there's lots of things you can do to make sure people understand, to demystify masonry to people, and put the best foot forward.
Oh, that is awesome. These are all fantastic tips, and thank you for bringing a perspective that can hopefully help my audience, which is right now it's a lot of young Masons that are kind of just now taking their first steps into the fraternity, and a lot of the guys, at least in our area, it's the 20 somethings that have kind of taken over the lodge, because the older generation is kind of they're snowbirding and they've left us the keys to the kingdom, and we're kind of trying to figure out how do we do things now. So your advice is really, really
Thank you.
helpful. Um, so I have one more question I wanted to ask you. Our current topic that we are going over, our educational series, if as you were, um, is what is a traveling man and how does one become a traveling man? Do you have an opinion on
Well,
that?
I think I have an opinion of what the ritual means. Um, and the end of every, jurisdictions are very different, a little bit different. You go jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I've sat in lodge in the West Indies and in different states, and you'll know what's going on. The words are a little bit different. Maybe they move around differently, but it's not that different. At the end of every ceremony, the chaplain has a standard prayer, and I talk about the 17 words in the middle of his prayer. These 17 words tell you everything you need to know about the mission of Freemasonry, how the mission of Freemasonry is accomplished, and what you should be doing as a Mason. And what he will say is that practice out of the lodge those great moral duties inculcated in it. And that's it, man. So practice out of the lodge those great moral duties. That's what a traveling man is. To work and receive master mason wages to travel in foreign countries, to travel in foreign spaces is to travel among the profane. It is anytime you step out of the lodge, it is a foreign space. The only space that is not foreign to you is the interior of the lodge room. And remember, the lodge is a metaphor for you, for the human condition. So you're in the safe space, the lodge, and anytime you're traveling outside of it, you are traveling in a foreign country. And that's when all of the cautions about letting the signs and modes of recognition be discovered by outstanding people. But what you want to do as a master mason, right, is you want to be able to earn a living and you want to be able to get the best wages you can or the best outcomes you can in the foreign countries, which is the world outside of masonry. That's what a traveling man is a man who takes what he learns in the lodge and then expresses it outside the lodge. That's how I take that.
I really like that. I don't think we've had anybody else have that kind of opinion of that the lodge is home. It's your country, and that every time you leave, anything you're doing outside of it is the traveling. I really like that. It gives me a lot to think about. Um, but overall, I do know that you are an author, correct?
Yes, I am.
I know we've kind of hinted at it here to the listeners, but please, I'd love to talk about your book. Ever since I heard from you, I actually picked up a copy of it and I started it myself, but I think you can you can probably explain your work a lot better than I can.
So, this is I think it's my 8th book. My ninth one comes out next week, and I want to talk about the ninth one because it's important. I wrote textbooks in sort of, and the reason you can't find many of them, you can find 3 or 4, is because I ghost wrote them for people, right? I was the author behind the authors on those, so I'm a really pretty good technical writer. But I had, we talked about Masonic education. I've been very involved in it. I've been, that's the Mason of the Year thing in California in 2020. So sometime before 2020, I was going around and I've been asked to speak at different lodges. And I had developed these lesson plans. I had picked apart Freemasonry. I had developed lesson plans. I had related them. Um, it's important that you relate them to something concrete, like I just did with the traveling concept, so you can use this tool. And so I would speak and speak, and I developed these lesson plans. And I started looking at it. I'm like, damn. So I have a blog. So let's try to turn a lesson plan into an essay, which I did very easily. And then I thought to myself, well, what kind of a structure of a book do I have here? And so the intent of the book is to take these lessons, and then you've got a copy. You'll note that It's structured around before the West Gate. You know, you're not a Mason yet. What would it be like? Then the first, second, and third degree, and then living the life of a Mason in 5 different sections of this book. And they're short magazine length articles or essays. And then at the end, I asked 3 questions. And the intention was, um, I hope, I always love when people disagree with me because then they're thinking, right? That's what you're supposed to do. And so what I wanted to happen was that you would take this book and then you would see one of these questions and you would ask your brothers about it. Or maybe you would guys would read this essay together and like a book club, you'd meet and just talk about this question and come to your own conclusions and probably discover things that I have yet to discover. And so I started to put that together. And then another lodge asked me to run a uh, a year long, once a month graduate seminar on Freemasonry. Go through all the degrees for all the men from A to Z. You know, really looking through a real deep dive on stuff. And, we did that, and I kept notes, and, you know, a graduate seminar, it's a 2-hour thing, and I would start out with a 10-minute conversation that I would talk about. Then I'd pointedly ask a question, and I'd point to a guy, and, "What do you think?" And I'd ask every man what he thought, and that would get the ball rolling, and I would keep notes, and this kinda guided me for what I believe men were hungry for, and thus, ultimately, I would develop the book that you have in your hand, and the hardest part was to figure out what the title was going to be.
Well, hey, it sounds like it was if you gotta have a problem writing a book, I guess that's probably the best one you can have. I will tell you from reading the book, I've just started according to my Kindle, I'm about 8% in, so I just barely started it. But, I really like how you have everything organized in here. It's very much, at least in the chapters that I'm in, it's very, very quick to the point. It's it's very well articulated to a way that makes your brain kind of think and goes into the topic. And then at the end, with the reflections and asking these questions about once again, it makes your brain kind of think about what you just read. So it's not like just reading a book where somebody's talking at you. It's more like you're trying to get your readers to think about the topics themselves, which is, I think, pretty rare in a Masonic education book. From all of them that I've read, the people are kind of writing them in a way of this is the fact, this is how it is. And I think you've taken the opposite approach where you're presenting this topic and um, your studies on them, everything that you've looked in on them, and then you're once again asking each reader or the person in the room, "What do you think?"
I'm
Which is like I said, very, very rare to read in a Masonic book.
Sam, I'm gonna give you a secret now. I'm gonna give your re your you
I'm
I'm gonna
excited.
give your listeners a secret, Samuel. And this is a writing secret, okay? And and the
Uh,
books you've read,
yeah.
they did not know this secret. And it was I found it out by accident. But it turns out that the writer in a book does about 15% of the work. The other 85% comes from the reader. You see, when you pick up a fiction work, you're imagining it in your mind and you imagine the character. That's why when you go see the movie, it's not the way you thought it was going to be because you'd already done the work, right? So when I wrote this
Right.
with the idea that you're you're going to bring this, you're going to read that. I'm looking at the first essay on secrecy. You're going to read that, and you're going to bring something completely different out of that than the man next to you, and to the man next to you because it's written in that way. It's written in the way to respect the fact that you're doing 85% of the work as the thinker. I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm like any mentor. I'm just going to guide you to that. And this really is that's one of the secrets of Albert Pike, by the way, Morals and Dogma. Guys read that thing as if he's gonna give them some secret, but he's not. He's not gonna give you anything. You
Yeah,
gotta get it yourself.
it's not a it's not a
No, it's
textbook.
not an easy read. So, and let's look at that
No.
first essay. because this is the one about secrecy, and I love this essay. It's one of my earliest ones. I really thought through, why is Masonry secret, right? Why is it important that it's secret? What does it come from that's a secret? And there's reasons that the information is secret. And this is part of the first essay. First off, it's born in secrecy. At the time that it moves from operative to speculative Mason. And by the way, from my perspective, stonemasons didn't have any special um, um, moral philosophies. Stonemasonry is a deep, deep, deep historical guild that we can trace all the way back to the Roman, at least before the Roman collegia. And if you look at the collegia that comes into play during the time of King Numus, so you're talking probably 300 or 400 BC. And when you've got the Phoenicians running around and that King Solomon's temple is probably still there at the time, it goes back that far. You can trace stonemasons, right? But philosophy, that's the tree, right? Stonemasonry. The philosophy is the branch, is the vine that's wrapped itself around Freemasonry so that it could survive. It's used Freemasonry, the trunk of this great tree, to wrap these philosophies around so they can live. And so the Masonry is the carrier, not the producer of this knowledge. And that's an interesting way to look at it, and that demystifies a lot. So if you look at the time that these men, 16th, 17th century, when Isaac Asimov is the first guy we got recorded, he's made a Mason in I think it's 1640, right? In 1649, the English Civil War, they executed King Charles, and that was a religious war. There was a lot of religious war still going on. If you thought differently than somebody else, it was state policy to kill you, right? It wasn't just that mobs went out and tried to kill. It was state policy. Catholics killed Protestants. Protestants killed Catholics, and so these men who were going to go in and discuss different things, it was useful to keep it secret, keep it to yourself, right? You didn't want to get, your head chopped off. So it's born in that time when the secrecy is important. The second thing that we find out is that um, these men also were very, very wise in their understanding of history. They knew that if you wrote something down, at this time especially is going on. Um, they're burning libraries right and left. The Vikings burned libraries, the Protestants, the Lutherans burned Catholic stuff and icons and libraries. The Catholics burned the Protestant stuff. The great libraries in Egypt were burned down. The Nazis, and they burned books. In fact, we burn books here in the United States every once in a while. We lose our minds. If you write it down, somebody can destroy the knowledge. And remember, this philosophy wants to survive. But if you give this philosophy mouth to ear and you say that I'm going to tell you what it is, and then you're going to keep it in your heart as a secret, it survives even if somebody tries to burn it down. And then lastly, it's a secret because we teach this in degrees, because this is very powerful knowledge, and maybe the person is just not ready to hear it yet. And so it's important that we manage how the information is given out through the degrees, and through Freemasonry. And so these are three powerful reasons that it's secret. And then I lay this out in the first chapter, which you've read. And at the end, I ask the question: how does the concept of secrecy, how does it work today? How do we encourage a great respect for the preservation and ethical use of knowledge in today's world? We get the internet, everything's available. How does an awareness of the historical persecution shape our understanding of the emphasis of protecting our teachings? And then what lessons can we draw from the degree system about the importance of experiential learning and personal and ethical development? So those questions now, that's the point of the book. The point of the book is to get you to ask those questions or ask other questions like those about Freemasonry.
Yeah, I actually kind of got hooked into it based on that first chapter because I had never thought about, we talk about Freemasonry like it's been around for time immemorial, which, arguably, like you said, with the stonemasons moving forward as it was, attaching that philosophical perspective to things to survive, it it did exist, but we had to keep things secret because, like you said, otherwise we all would have been burned at the stake during the Inquisition because we weren't exactly thinking dogmatically. So I never thought about that that was probably a reason why things were so secretive. I mean, I know we've kind of got that stigma around our fraternity sometimes that we have all these secrets, and I mean, like we've said before, you can find out a lot of things on the internet just by Google searching now. So I would argue that a lot of things aren't really secret anymore, but
Y-
back then that wasn't really the case, and it was really a way just to protect ourselves so that way nobody could we wouldn't be, labeled as witches.
Yes, and and by the way, that's a pretty practical essay, but when you get into the book, there's some revolutionary thoughts in this book, that if you read it, there are some revolutionary things on transformation, personal transformation in this book. One of the things, I hit every Masonic podcast that I could find, but I also hit every podcast now that talks about self-help and self-development. I'm beginning to do those also. And the next round will be the two podcasts that are, quite frankly, like they want to talk about the paranormal, the spiritual, because as a writer, I want as large a platform as I can get. And I think this stuff is transformational. And so there's some stuff as you get further in the book, it moves away from practical to transformational. But I want to pull something out here because if all of the secrets of Freemasonry are available, and they are, and if all the philosophy is available, and it is, because you can read, we have the four cardinal virtues. We didn't pull those out of the air. We got those from Plato. I mean, he got the four cardinal virtues. He just had them in a different order. Um, but there's one thing that Masonry has, and that's the 3 degrees, because the way the ritual is built into, or the way the philosophy is built into the ritual, it gives the initiate 2 things. The first is what's called participatory knowing. In other words, by being the initiate and by being the officer, you participate in the idea of knowing. Um, you do this in church. If you go to church, when you sing or you stand up, you sit down, you kneel, you're participating in the service, and it draws you nearer to the feeling, the spiritual feeling. Well, Masonry, by acting out the ritual and participating in it, is called participatory knowing. This is one of the strengths of going through the degrees. The other is perspectival knowing, which is maybe the most powerful type of knowing there is. And that's as you go through the chairs, and any man who's done this will find out, the room looks different. The degrees look different. You can sit in different parts of the room and watch the same degree and see something completely different because you've changed your perspective. And the power of perspectival knowing, coupled with the power of participatory knowing, now Masonry becomes a hugely powerful and transformative tool in a man's life and a reason one should become a Mason.
Hmm, I guess I never really thought of it that way. Huh. I I have to say I've probably seen about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 300 Master Mason degrees, but now that you do mention it, every time I end up sitting somewhere different in the room for it, I get a different perspective of it.
It doesn't need to be much of a
Huh,
shade for you to get a different, because what'll happen is your mind will drift to a different place. You'll see something different from a different angle. You hear it in a different way. So there's perspective on the participatory knowing part of it. And that's why to me, and this is, I'm the officers coach, and we I really emphasize, I really emphasize this, but I do it in a very subtle way, that the degrees are for the sideliners. Because they're the men who see the whole thing, right? When
right,
you're the
right.
initiate, man, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea. And you might remember a little bit of what happened. But until you see it, you're like, what? Oh, that's what was going on. And so I think that, you have to understand you're acting out this mystery play or this morality play for the sideliners and for yourself. And the initiate is the vehicle that allows you to do that. They're not gonna get that's why, we go through the chairs, I think, to become a master mason. And by the way,
Uh,
I also approach this book, um, from this perspective, and I say this, and this would make men very angry when I would say this, and I didn't know why at the time, then I figured it out. And this is part of the forward too, is, I failed a lot early trying to to educate or try to pursue this education path. But I don't believe that I'm a master mason. I, I'm not. In fact, um, if you look at an operative mason, and you, let's say you were a fellow craft or journeyman mason, and you wanted to become a master mason, you went to your master, and what did you present to him? You presented to him your master's piece, your piece of work that was that showed everything you did do. That's where the word comes from. This is my master's piece. It shows what I am capable of. Now, if the point of, and this is a question I'll ask a man, if the point of masonry is personal development, that means you're working on yourself. Today, as you stand before me, are you your masterpiece?
And in my case, I would say
That's
absolutely
it.
not. I am still a work in
That's right.
progress.
That's
Yeah,
how I see it.
I love
So
that.
I am. So I don't want to. No, of course not. Right? Because the masterpiece, I think, is the best version of you, and the best version of you will change over time. You know, I'm much older than you are, so the best version of me physically is very different than the best version of you as a young man. And the best version, but are you the best version of you? Then you're a master. So I say, I'm not a master mason. I'm still working on this. I don't want to claim this is my masterpiece. That's terrible.
No, I 100% agree with you there. We often talk about that on our show that, I always say I'm like, "Oh, we are the rough ashlers 100%. We are we're still getting and we're still making the mistakes and going, "Oops, didn't know we couldn't do that or didn't know that wasn't how that went. Sorry, our bad." But I mean, we are master masons, but at the same time, we're still works in progress. I really liked talking about your introduction just for a second. I really liked there's a lesson in your introduction that I think just about any person that likes to do educational speaking in their lodge should really take to heart. And you were talking about how when you first started doing these, you kind of got these like people were kind of bored. It was really hard to get them enthusiastic about education. They would kind of stare at you blankly, like, yeah, hurry up, move this along. Um, and then once you started getting them more involved in the topics, that's when they started to be excited to have these talks during lodge. And I just got to say that it's a phenomenal piece of advice for anybody, any Mason that's going to be giving any kind of education in their lodge.
Yes, and well, this comes down to I always this is another really good piece of advice. If you do something right, when I give a lecture, if I'm not happy with the outcome, it's not the audience. It's me, right? And so now I take that back and I think it through and okay, that didn't work. What did I do? What didn't I do? And so that's I think the lesson you're seeing there is that if what you're doing is not successful, then you need to take ownership of that and figure out why it's not successful and what you have to do to change the outcome because it's what you have to do. It's not what others have to do. And yes, I changed my complete took a different tact on how I was going to approach education. I did Masonic Education Stated Meeting last night, and you brought up the Ashlars, and I love to talk about them because everybody gets, oh, here's the rough Ashlar, here's the perfect Ashlar, right? And so that's you get the metaphor, but wait a minute, man, there is so much more in that. And here's how I unpack that for you, just to get you to think a little deeper, right? Those are part of the three movable jewels, right? What's the third one? The
Mhm,
third one is the trestle board. Why is that? Right?
mhm.
Can you go from a rough state to a perfect state without a plan? That's
No,
that's
not at
why the
all.
plan bridges the perfect. So that's the first lesson. The second is that, and this is for men who are on investigative committees. You know, uh, when the stone when a guy goes out of the quarry and pulls out a rough rock he's going to work on, he doesn't get one that's too big. He doesn't get one that's too small. He doesn't get one that's cracked. When you get men that want to join or even affiliate, one of the questions I ask myself is, do I see the potential for them to become, a perfect ashlar? Or do they have the raw material? Are they the right size? Are they the right consistency for my lodge and for this journey they're going to undertake? And so I think that's another lesson about guarding the West Gate. So I'll bet you've never heard at least one of those lessons.
Right. No, actually, I've never seen anybody put it in terms of doing before someone's even a candidate,
And so,
taking that lesson and incorporating it. That's
so by doing that
I
now
like
we
that.
have a deeper understanding of those objects, right? And we can see where they come from. And then you
Right.
can dive even deeper into this because there's more layers to uncover. And so that's the thing that I sit and I will do is I will ask the question, why am I doing this? And then I will dive deep, 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 deep until it doesn't go any further, and then I'll back out and try to figure out a path to because I'm still writing. I mean, I finished this book in January and I let it sit for 6 months. I let it sit because I didn't know. I just get let it sit. And I didn't put it out till what did we went into production in June. So, between that night, I kept writing, and I kept giving education, and I have more essays that I've done. But yeah, anyway, so that's what else did you want to know? You want to talk about anything else? What do you want?
So the title of this book um is The Temple
Yeah.
Within. You said you have another book that's coming out next week as well?
Yes, I do. So, I was sitting around years ago, I guess 40 years ago, I would write short stories and I would get rejections. And I couldn't write fiction, I couldn't set the scene, and I couldn't write dialogue to save my life, and I just couldn't do it. And I worked at it, and I
Mm.
worked at it, and I worked at it, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So I thought, I need to find a bridge. I need to find a way to take me from. And you're reading. I'm a pretty good technical writer. I mean, I'm getting my point across, right? I wanted to bridge over to this new
Right.
place called fiction because I have these stories I want to get out. In fact, the so I decided to create a bridge to teach myself to become a fiction writer. And so what I did, and I did 10 years ago when it first started, I became an Uber driver. And I have my next book coming out is called Chasing the Surge 10,000 Rides into the American Night. And I did 10,000 rides in Los Angeles as an Uber driver. And I collected the stories of all the things that went on from crimes that were committed to love relationships that went sideways. And
Oh, no.
I collected these stories. I collected these stories, and I started to write. Right, the pandemic ends everything, right? And so the pandemic ends everything, and I start to write. The first pass of this is awful. It's 100,000 words of awfulness, and I just look at this and I go, man, this just sucks. So I rewrote it again. I rewrote it again. I rewrote it again, and then I set it aside. And then I started working on the temple within. And the temple within is about reflection and transformation. That's what the book's about. And then I went back to Chasing the Surge. I go, "Oh, I know what's wrong with this. It's a collection of great stories, but it doesn't go anywhere." And then I realized the story is me. I'm the story. I change as a human being as I go through these 10,000 rides. And so I shift everything to the story arc and I adopt a certain voice, and now the scenes begin to flow naturally. And so by taking real things that happened and real dialogue and then being able to recreate that so you could get it in your head. I did bridge myself into fiction and I've begun to write my fiction and the fiction title is The Carter Rituals and it is a past master who's also a retired homicide detective who falls into murder mysteries. And the first
That actually sounds
yeah,
really
yeah, and the
cool.
first book is called Murder in the Lodge and it's a murder that takes place between the practice for installation and the installation, one of the brothers is murdered, and all the suspects are the officers who are about to be installed. And so that's the my first. That's so Chasing the Surge, which comes out, is my bridge work for me, my personal my transformation as a writer because I want to get away from technical writing. It's okay, but I really want to get some the other thing is with the fiction, if you go back and when you get Chasing the Surge, if you read it, I realized that I could put a lot of Masonic philosophy. I could pack that in there and hide it, right? And so I'm thinking, well, with this fiction now, I'm really hiding masonry in it and these ideas, and I'm having fun with it. So that's why the next book that comes out it was pushed along by completing this work, and that also is gonna I have a file now because I think there may be, these conversations with you, the continuing Masonic education, I'm keeping a file of all the ideas that come up, the new essays that I write, and I don't think there'll be a temple within 2, but there might be some kind of follow-on work that I put together.
Love that. So, how long until we can expect to see a murder in the lodge?
Uh, well, here's the thing too. This is more writer advice. Um, a book is like a child, all right? And you're gonna write a b I my first book came out in 2004, it was a textbook, and I got a royalty check, last March, and I get another one probably in September of like $19, right? So, it's still that means that 20 some years later, I still have accounting issues to deal with this book. So it's like an old person, it's about to die at some point. The most fun you have with a book is the conception. It's like anything else, man. It's the making the when you get the idea, that's the fun part. Everything else is work. So right now, we're in the marketing phase of this book and Chasing the Surge, which comes out, like I said, in a week or 10 days, will go into high gear. So marketing is going to say 3 to 6 months. And I'll write slowly, but I don't see myself writing seriously, I don't know, maybe February. So, yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't write every day. I still
Hey,
write every day, and sometimes I get really excited and I'll, write for hours on it.
hey, nothing wrong with that. You got to let the creative juices go. But I'll tell you what, when you have that one out as well, I want you to come back. I want to talk all about that one because I, my D Malay advisor would have loved you.
Well,
He had,
go ahead.
he had so many ideas that were kind of like that. Sorry, that were we would drive in the car as you do for DMLA events to go across the state, and he would pitch ideas for movies, and one of them was very close to what you're talking about, but it took place during World War II, and it's phenomenal. I love the idea.
Well, there's only one story. You know that, right?
Oh,
There's only
yeah?
one
Uh,
story. Yeah, of
really?
course. Now wait a minute now. Think about this. I'm gonna give the third degree, right? But think about this story. Think about the book of Exodus and Star Wars. So, Book of Exodus, you got a guy, a loner kind of guy living in the desert tending sheep. Star Wars, you got kind of a loner kind of teenage
Mhm.
guy on a desert planet tending droids. And then with the Moses, he has like a apparition appears before him and sends him on a journey. The other guy has a droid with a message that sends him on a journey. They go on a journey with a sidekick. One takes Aaron, the other one takes Han Solo with him. And they go and they confront the ultimate evil. One is the Pharaoh, the other is Darth Vader, and they destroy it. And they're transformed
You're
as individuals.
you're absolutely right.
The same story.
My eh, it goes back to it, though, the same thing that my advisor used to tell me. He'd said, Shakespeare has done everything, so if it's
That
I
doesn't mean we shouldn't sit around the
I
campfire and retell stories. That just means that we should understand, the third degree is a transformational story, but it's the hero's journey. And that's the thing I encourage you to, by the way, as a Mason. Remember that Freemasonry, the 3 degrees is a hero's journey. You've undertaken it. That makes you a hero. And that makes you heroic in your efforts as a Freemason. And so that's a big calling. And not only that, but it's also a dangerous calling. And so, if you understand that as Freemasons, we've undertaken voluntarily the hero's journey, and you are the hero, then act heroic in life.
could not have said that any better myself, brother. So where can my listeners find your
Well, you know
book?
what they can do? Very simple. Go to hitechcj.com, hitechcj.com. That's my leftover website from when I did consulting, but I've transformed it to books. Or you can go straight to Amazon and put in The Temple Within and my name, Raymond Foster. It should pick up. If you do get a copy of it, I encourage all the brothers, please write a review, good, bad, or indifferent. Reviews drive search engines drive readers. And it's always when somebody gets your book, it's a huge compliment. So thank you very much for purchasing the book. I do appreciate it. And lastly, if you guys in your podcast journey ever come up with a question and you want to talk over it with me, you give me a call. You know my number.
Would happily love to. Actually, and thank you for giving me something. I'm a third shift worker, so a lot of times I need something to keep my mind busy during the monotony. So this actually helped me the other night when I was stuck, just kind of sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I got to actually get my brain going. So I look forward to finishing your book. I am just barely in the beginning of it, but it sounds like I'm going to have my mind blown when I get a little bit deeper. But thank you for the time that you've been able to give. I hopefully our listeners will jump right on and will take a peek at some of your works. And I just want to say thank you for being on the show with us here at the Third Degree Masonic
You're
Podcast.
welcome, Brother Samuel. I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Anytime, brother. Remember, craftsmen, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only reflect those of the hosts or guests.